Okay, please have a seat. Hello, everyone. So I guess we're almost ready to start. Yes, so I'm Virginie Robert. I work for Les Échos, the business daily, and I'm head of the foreign desk over there. And we're going to talk about what has been probably the underlying theme, the whole conference, which is the new Trump administration coming in. Something that gives a lot of questions, puts lots of questions in the air. And we're mainly going to focus on economic policy and foreign policy. And to talk about this, we have several panelists with us who are very well acquainted with Washington. Akita here was a foreign correspondent. You were White House foreign correspondent for Nikkei, so he knows the drill. Peter Beyer is a German Bundestag foreign affairs. You're head of the foreign affairs, or you're part of the foreign affairs committee for the Bundestag, and an expert on transatlantic relations. Jean-Claude Gruffat, who's a French-American banker. He notably worked for Citigroup, but other banks too, and very much involved in American politics. He's been in 2 presidential campaigns, and the last one he had a favorite, and that was Nikki Haley. Then we have Jay Truesdale, who's CEO at TD International. So it's a Washington-based company that gives geopolitical strategy and market intelligence advice to corporations. And last but not least, Farid Yasseen, that you probably all know because he's been here many, many times, who was ambassador of Iraq in France, in Paris, where we met, and also in Washington, D.C., and now is back to Iraq. So a lot has been said about Trump those last 3 days, but I thought it would be interesting to see the question is how to deal with the man, you know. And we have first-hand experiences here because a lot of them have been involved in their administration or sometimes even in the administration with Donald Trump. So maybe we're going to start with Hiro. Tell us what has been the experience of Trump 1 in Japan, and how you lived through the thing.
Okay. First, thank you very much. I came from the other part of the globe, so I'm very honored to be here. And I just want to make 2 quick comments, including the answer to your question. One is about the distinctive potential differences between first and Trump, and its risk, and also its opportunity. And second comment is about how we can best mitigate, or even we means US allies, mitigate and also take advantage of Trump's DNA. So first point, difference. I think key words for first-term Trump were, of course, transactional, as we all know, and second keyword was maybe playing golf together.
Playing golf, yeah.
So this means that Trump made much of personal relationship and also chemistry. So then Prime Minister Abe understood his DNA as a politician and played golf for 4 times and enjoyed American beef hamburger together. Unfortunately, I don't know the result of the golf match because it is kept as a state secret. But I believe that he made effort to lose by slim margin in order to please Mr. Trump. But the second term will not be that simple at all. Second Trump will have much higher aspiration. He has only 4 years, so he will try to achieve something big, to be remembered as, to make himself greater again, or even greater. So there comes 2 new keywords. One keyword is so-called neo-Yalta diplomacy.
Neo-Yalta diplomacy.
Neo-Yalta diplomacy. So again, 1942, Roosevelt, Churchill negotiated with Stalin about how to establish world order after World War II. Of course, the context is completely different, but the neo-Yalta diplomacy. And then second keyword could be a Nobel Peace Prize.
Nobel Peace Prize.
So
Okay.
I'll get back to the point. So first, New Yalta diplomacy. This means that Trump will try to achieve something big by directly negotiating with big power, such as China, Russia, regardless whether they are partner or adversary, but the size of the country will be more important in order to achieve something big. So that's the reason why he really likes Putin and also Xi Jinping, Chinese leader, and he invited Xi Jinping to an inaugural ceremony. And I don't think
But I don't think he's coming. I don't think he's coming.
Yeah, maybe he's not coming, but if Xi Jinping is as shrewd as Trump, maybe, I don't know, maybe virtually.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Trump doesn't necessarily love those people, but I think Trump believes that those dictators or autocrat leaders are more useful to negotiate and achieve something big.
So he's going to be more comfortable with rogue leaders to negotiate.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of the same DNA.
Right, same DNA. So, but to be fair, I think there is advantage and also big risk. And advantage is that maybe Trump might be able to achieve some big progress on a deadlocked issue. A typical one is war in Ukraine. But there are much bigger risks. That is the national interest of U.S. allies in Europe and Asia will be neglected or even ignored. Let's remember that in 1942, Roosevelt, Churchill negotiated with Stalin, but I don't think that they consult in detail about that talks in advance with the U.S. or British allies. Of course, context is different, but there is a risk that middle power U.S. allies will be ignored.
Yeah, we're going to come back to this.
Yeah. Then, similarly, there are second keyword is Nobel Peace Prize. Somebody, Israel.
Obama got it.
Right,
and was first surprised by it too.
Indeed. So Trump wants to make himself greater than Obama, and I believe that he firmly believes that Trump deserves better than Obama, who won the Nobel Prize by just by setting a goal to abolish nuke. So one of the biggest targets for that purpose could be North Korea or Iran or Middle East as a whole. So as for North Korea, again, he repeatedly says that I have a very good relation with Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader. I don't think he really loves him, but the North Korean leader, his relation with North Korean leader is important to make a deal. And so that is the one. And maybe, on the other hand, it is there was a discussion in the previous panel. Another agenda could be it could be a Middle East. Maybe he tried to complete the puzzle of Abraham Accord in Middle East, or try to tackle with the nuclear issue of Iran. So again, there is advantage. Advantage is that he is kind of unpredictable, and the disruptive leadership may help to make a progress on those issues. But the flip side is a risk that another risk is that he will maybe negotiate in a much weaker position. Let's look. He will only have 4 years, but virtually he have only 2 years before the midterm election.
Right.
So compared to leader in North Korea or China and Russia, so he's in a weaker position. So that is a risk.
Yeah.
Then final point: how we should mitigate or take advantage. I think there are 3 approaches. One is a bad approach. Second is a good approach. And third is a best approach. And the bad approach is to preach Trump and then try to change his mind. we all know that it is very, very counterproductive. Then good approach is to mitigate the risk for US allies in Europe or Asia by collaborating together to absorb better shock of coming from Trump. Maybe we are doing it already. Collaboration. But the maybe best approach is to take advantage of his slogan, that is, make America great again. So I would say maybe we can tell him like this. As a US allies, we really want US to become greater again. And also, we also want to be greater again, even greater, together with US. In this context, we are very willing to do whatever we could support for your big deal to be successful. So this approach will maybe give more leverage than preaching or flattening Trump.
Okay, well, thank you for covering so much ground in a very short time like this, but we're going to try to make it more as a conversation and less an expose. So, Peter, because you worked with Merkel, and so you've been working with two administrations, or yeah, can you tell us about it and how you went through it, and what's your takeaway from it too?
Thank you very much, Virginie, and thanks to everyone surviving all the way through the last panel of this conference. Yes, actually, I had the honor and the pleasure to be Transatlantic coordinator in the Angela Merkel government under 2 years of Donald Trump administration and 2 years of Joe Biden. So there, I could see and experience the difference and the changes over the time. But maybe I start with a brief anecdote. When I came into office as Transatlantic coordinator, that was in May 2018. That was 2 weeks before the US ambassador to Germany, Rick Grenell, whom everybody is probably still familiar with his name, came into office, so almost at the same time. So my first meeting or encounter with Rick Grenell was the following. So he approached me after a seat at dinner. He came to me and said, this was it, actually I quote him, "Hey Peter, tell me how many of your helicopters are actually flying and how many of your submarines are actually fully operable?" So I looked at him and said, "Welcome to Germany, Mr. Ambassador. Let's go to the bar and have a gin and tonic." And so that was an icebreaker, and we respected each other. We did a lot of things together, but of course, there was a lot of things on the agenda between our two governments or administrations in Washington, D.C. and Berlin. So Trump and his ambassador to Germany, Rick Grenell, and the Angela Merkel government, 2% defense spending, Chinese technology in our telecommunications grid, trade, tariffs, steel and aluminum, many other things. But then again, one has to keep in mind that, although for, at least after the Second World War up to now, and hopefully for the foreseeable future, the United States of America, our closest partner, I would even say friend and ally when it comes to protection of our sheer existence, if we talk about defense and nuclear sharing. But also if you look to culture and trade, our largest trade partner outside of the European Union. So we need each other somehow. And so this is important. And even under the Obama administration, there were problems that we had.
Yeah,
not so much on the substance, also this, but there was this wiretapping of Angela Merkel's cell phone that was under the Obama presidency. Yeah. So we somehow figured this out as well. One last remark, just very recently, over the past 2-3 weeks, Angela Merkel published her memoirs, thick book, 700 pages or so, and she presented it twice. She started off in Berlin, on stage in one of the theaters there, a nice conversation, a lot of anecdotes there, and people are interested in, how you got along with your colleagues in France and so on, but also certainly with Trump and Obama and so on. And the second presentation was in Washington, D.C., very recently, last week or so, together with former President Obama. And although both of them had a bad start before Obama was elected president, when he was only a candidate, they seemed to get along very well. The charming strategy Angela Merkel tried when Donald Trump was in the Oval Office as President of the United States of America failed completely. if you still, I still have in my mind these images of this video footage when Angela Merkel was sitting together with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and he denied the handshake.
I remember that, yeah.
That was not, so this charming strategy completely failed. And so I totally agree with my Japanese colleague that, there's no time to waste. Donald Trump knows it's his last chance, 2 years, 4 years. We'll start with dozens of executive orders right from day one onwards. So we better prepare in Europe and elsewhere in the world, and we might come back to this, how to do this later.
And talking about Rick Grinnell that you just mentioned, he was appointed today as some kind of special envoy for...
Everything.
Yeah, everything.
Troubleshooter.
And among everything, there is Iran and North Korea that you were just mentioning. So, yeah. So, I don't know, maybe Farid, you're over there, we're going to change swap a little bit. You were ambassador in Washington, D.C. You've seen both administrations, or mainly Trump? Tell us.
So, vaste sujet, as the French would say. My experience with U.S. administrations goes back to the 1990s when I was a Iraqi opposition activist with the Clinton administration. My first trip to the White House was in '94. But I served with the lame duck Obama, a few months, and then the full Trump administration, and then a year and a half under Biden. And when you're talking about such a wide subject, it really helps to focus what you want to say. And very often, when you want to say, you choose your typical audience. And so I'm going to focus on what my typical audience right now is my successor in Washington. What can I tell him to make his job easier to understand how the Trump administration would work? May I do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So the first thing you have to understand is that this election is completely different from the previous election. A lot of people in the United States in 2016 thought that the election was Hillary's to lose. This election, Trump won, period. He won the Electoral College, he won the popular vote, he won Congress, both houses, and he has the Supreme Court. So it's a mandate. Position is completely different. He can do whatever he chooses to do. That's first thing. Second thing, in 2016, the Republicans weren't actually really well prepared for winning the White House. That's why they had, and you might correct me if you want, such a difficult time finding people that would stick with the Trump administration, that were suited to his personality, to his ideas. So that's one of the reasons why he had so many, I think, departures. This time it's going to be different. It'll be rehearsed. It's actually been prepared. A lot of people have been working on it, think tanks, groups of sympathizers, funders. And one way to look at how things will evolve, and one has to realize that a presidential election is like a crowning in the United States. And so it comes with a lot of activities. And so I think it would be helpful for diplomats, particularly my counterpart in Washington now, to look at how the inauguration will be run. And I have the impression that it will be run in a much more effective, professional, flamboyant, I would say, way than what happened in 2016.
Well, maybe you can ask Jay, because you were at the State Department, I think, during the first Trump administration. So how do you answer back to Farid? Did you feel that it's better prepared? And
yes, in the spirit of conversation, I'll pick up on the points that were just made.
Sure.
I really do believe that there is a sense of mandate and a sense of mission that's been endowed on the part of not just President-elect Trump, but by those around him. And indeed, there is a difference between now and 2016 in that Trump has the experience of having governed and is entering into office with that experience, as well as a fairly concrete sense of what it means to address his top 5 policy priorities, which not necessarily in order are tariffs, immigration, China, Russia, Ukraine, and the Middle East. Mm-hmm. However, while he has a mandate and while he is entering into office with tremendous momentum, he has surrounded himself with individuals who do not have senior level executive experience. They are, with one exception, the new head of the CIA, Ratcliffe. None of the cabinet level selectees, nominees, have served in that capacity previously. And so while he is entering with this background, with this experience, others have some ground to gain, at least in the first 6 to 12 months. What does that mean in practical terms? Well, we saw a lot of turmoil within the first Trump administration in the cabinet. Some cabinet members pushing very hard, others seeking to be very conciliatory from the beginning. I think this group will be more on the conciliatory side, more deferential to Trump than what we saw in the first go-round. The other dynamic that we saw in the first administration was around what the professional class, the civil servants, did upon the entry of President Trump and his cabinet-level leaders, particularly at the State Department, where I was serving at the time, but also in the intelligence community, both CIA, FBI, as well as at Commerce and potentially other executive-level agencies. What I would project is that there will be early retirements taken by retirement-eligible individuals who just won't want to put up with another round of uncertainty on the part of the interagency policymaking process when so much will be centralized in the White House, particularly around those 5 policy areas. So what will that mean? I believe there will be a gap on technical questions, very important policy questions, but more technical, that will not be centralized in the Oval Office in terms of decision making. And so to fill that gap, there'll be a lot of pressure on the incoming administration to push through nominees, to name nominees, and to push through the roughly 1,200 to 1,400 nominees that will take senior level positions in the administration. And of course, roughly 1/3 of those are either economic positions or national security positions. And so I would say that if you were writing this memo to your colleague who's coming in, know how to gain access to the White House, of course, but know how to work through the institutions that are going to go through a lot of turmoil. And the last point I'll make is that getting access to those institutions is going to require unorthodox access points. Some of these are proxies for President Trump. Others are gatekeepers, people who have been named as gatekeepers but play that role in an informal way. So it's going to be really important to know how to gain access, how to maintain relationships in this transition period when so much potentially could be both centralized but also in turmoil in much of the rest of the administration.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Jean-Claude, maybe you'd like to elaborate a little bit on it, because apparently Trump has brought a lot of loyalists or people he thinks in government will please the voters, people they know, they see on TV. It's a little bit like the Muppet Show, Dr. Oz, whoever. Well, it's a little crazy. Then he names SARs that he feels are important for certain missions. But as you mentioned, not everybody is prepared for that task. So what do you think of this mix of bringing in loyalists that you feel that they're not going to stop you, but not very experienced people, and you're going to make the whole world crazy because it's, as you said, it's going to be really hard to know who to reach and who to talk to. So what do you think of that kind of management, and why do you think Trump is doing it that way? Jean-Claude, since you know politics.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks to Thierry, thanks to Song Nim for inviting me again. This is the third time, I guess, I'm speaking of Trump and the change of administration. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that have been said by the other members of the panels. They're all very relevant, and I subscribe to a large extent to what has been said. I'm trying to sort of present a different perspective. I've been in the US since, on and off, since 1987. I came as a documented immigrant, I like to say. I became an American citizen, and I was involved in American politics, but I would say at the ground level, from almost the very beginning, the campaign for the election of Bush father, Bush 41 in 1988. So I've seen the sort of the Republican Party and the game at the local level in New York, to a lesser extent in Washington, because I've been involved with a number of think tanks. So I will make a number of comments and not necessarily spend a lot of time commenting, but I'd be happy to take in the Q&A session some of the points that are more relevant for your own personal interest. Trump is transactional, controversial, consequential, very supportive of himself. If you ask me what's Trump's main interest, that's Donald J. Trump. Then the next interest is probably his family. The third interest is his business, and then the rest come afterwards. So that's the first consideration. You might say, during the first administration, he was not prepared to be elected, and essentially what he did, he worked with the Republican Party. And there were a lot of chaos, and things didn't turn out, and there was a lot of people were replaced, didn't stay long. Very typical, his first chief of staff when he was elected in 2016 was the head of the RNC, Reince Priebus. So he really led the Republican Party to a large extent, drive the show for him, and he surrounded himself with people he was not familiar with. This time is completely different. Trump 2024 is going to be loyalty first and foremost. And that explains some of the comments that were made earlier on. I mean, he's not necessarily recruiting people who are very experienced in the public sector, in the securities, or I'm not saying they are not competent, but they are people who have not held that type of responsibility before. I concur completely with what you said, but I'm not going to repeat it, but you're absolutely correct on that. So that's going to be very different. Small anecdote, I think if you want to understand what he's going to do, you have to understand that the Trump who's going to be the 47th president of the United States is not different from the Trump who was in business. He's acting exactly the same way. My first encounter, not with Trump personally, but with his organization, was in the early 90s in New York. Some of you who are familiar with the United States may remember a company that was called Eastern. Eastern was running a shuttle between Washington, Boston, and New York, and Eastern went bankrupt. Trump tried to buy Eastern, and as a banker, I was asked to fund the operation. I look at the financial, I decided not to do it. So I had an opportunity to meet Trump because I said no to the loan. I didn't meet him at that time. But that's not important. The other thing is his relation to politics. He's always been involved in politics, but he was an independent, he was a Democrat probably for a longer period of time, and he was a Republican. He was twice a Republican, and then he became an independent. I mean, it was very, but he was contributing to some politicians. And many of the politicians that he criticized afterwards were people that he funded when he was in business. I give you this is an anecdote, but I got it from the person that he was dealing with. Some of you may know or heard of the last Republican governor in New York was George Pataki. George Pataki was elected in 1995, had 3 mandates of 4 years. He stayed until 2006. He had never met Trump, but I got it from him. He told me that one day, just after he was elected for the first time, he got a phone call. Hi, this is Donald J. Trump. Governor, congratulations, I'm happy to see you've been elected. Did you get my check? And Pataki said, well, I mean, thanks for your congratulations, I appreciate it. I don't think I've received a check from you. He says, that's impossible, I send it, I'm going to fire my secretary, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, next thing, a day later, he got a check which was antedated for $20,000. That's just an anecdote.
Yeah, but it's a funny
Now,
one, though.
in terms of people who's been nominated, let me say 2 or 3 things. One, he's not expecting that every nominee is going to be appointed by the Senate. The Constitution in the United States says that the Senate has a role to advise and consent. And the person that he chooses to be the Attorney General, which is the Minister of Justice in the United States, was actually not supported. He did a number of things. He was heavily criticized. In particular, you remember, we had the Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, coming and speaking to us a couple of days ago. Matt Gaetz was responsible to a large extent for McCarthy being kicked out of his position. Now, Trump is not stupid. He has many flaws, but he's far from being stupid. I mean, don't consider him to be mentally deficient or anything. He's a smart guy, but he not necessarily, I would say, the ethics of everybody. I try to be neutral and diplomatic. So what's happening? He realized that he wouldn't get the Senate to confirm Gaetz. What he did, he chose somebody else. But he chose somebody who was the former Attorney General in Florida. So look at the origin. Instead of saying what they've done, what are their competence, level of competence, look at where they're coming from. In the nominees of this new administration that's going to come to power in January this year, you have a number of New Yorkers, and you have a number of people from Florida. And you notice that when he stepped down in 2020, when he was not re-elected, he moved to Florida. So, I mean, he surrounds himself, again, with people he knows. That's the criteria. I could say more, but I'll probably stop for the time being.
So it's interesting to see that a lot of power is really going to be focused in the White House, from what we understand, because it's going to be difficult in the administrations, because they're going to be empty for a while. We're going to find the right guys to talk to, and a lot of complex issues are at hand, especially on the economic field. We're going to start with that. We had tariffs. We have deregulation, which matters a lot to Europeans. And we have fiscal policy. And I'd like to know what you think of what it means for us and how we can deal. Maybe, as Hiko said, maybe we should collaborate. You know, well, Europeans were used to collaborate, but right now there's a little incentive. Maybe you could tell us about it. Like, everybody wants to go his own way with Trump because he's afraid, especially, I mean, in Germany is a good case for that, case in point, and how to deal with Trump. But for instance, deregulation is going to change the innovation landscape in America. They're going to open the gates. Everybody's going to be able to do whatever he wants to try to innovate, and that can attract our companies who are going to find a freer field over there. So that's a problem that we have to think about, Europeans, and probably people in Asia too. And there's also a lot of deterrence with tariffs, because he wants to bring investments in America from us also. So it really poses a question of competitivity for our firms in Europe and everywhere else in the world. I mean, I'm not only talking about Europeans. So what do you think, what is the good attitude here? I mean, Germany is a good case in point, because, I mean, tariffs is really a real problem for you guys if it comes up, because he hasn't mentioned tariffs towards us now. For now, it's only Canada, Mexico, China, but it will come up. So how do you feel about this? Do you think we have to try to work together? Do you think the temptation of doing it alone is too strong because the stakes are so high?
Yeah, so since I'm the German,
yeah.
so I try to share some thoughts that I have in this regard with regard to trade and tariffs. If we just jump back in history some years, it was under the Obama administration, we failed to successfully negotiate Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP. Yeah. What a pity, what a lost option. It was a historic mistake to make, that we could not agree with our closest partner in the world on these issues. But that's time gone by. What is in place is the Trade and Technology Council, which is working somehow across the Atlantic, but it's not an FDA. But a free trade agreement across the Atlantic is, I think, only if you are naive or if you are a dreamer. I think the times for the foreseeable future of an FDA across the Atlantic is over. Under the Joe Biden administration, they was friendly and everything, but they are not big friends of free trade, and the next Donald Trump administration certainly neither. So, from experience, I understand and I acknowledge that there will be a lot of differences from Trump 1 to Trump 2. Certainly, I mean, it goes without saying. But some of the things of the experience, will be helpful to understand and to cooperate somehow, if you so will, with the incoming Trump administration. And that is, Donald Trump said, his most favorite word, if he looks up a dictionary, is tariffs. Right? You take this guy by his very own words. It's not new to us. He proved this during his first administration. And by the way, the incumbent Joe Biden administration did not do better. They were even more protectionist than the Donald Trump 1 administration was. They let everything in place. They put on top of this the Inflation Reduction Act. And by the way, I never talked to anyone, to any German business people who did not love IRA, who had investments already in the United States or expanded this because, they get a lot of subsidies and everything. So it's good for them. They love it. And Donald Trump, if he follows his own agenda, will add up on that. He will, I guess, leave something like IRA in place with a different context. But I very certainly expect him to impose 10 or even 20% of tariffs on goods being imported from us, being Europe. And Germany as one of the largest export nations, we don't have much, anything else than our goods and services that we export. So this will hit us hard potentially. So what to do about this? I pick up something that has been mentioned here with regard to the Republican Party and having access, and what Jay was saying, having access to Donald Trump himself or to his inner circle, whoever that is, not only cabinet ranking members. But over the years, we have, I think, not invested enough time and energy actually to establish these communication lines. I'm from a conservative party, from the CDU. So our partner party is a Republican party on the other side of the Atlantic. It has changed over time. We are organized internationally in the IDU, in the International Democracy Union. But it's difficult to communicate, but we need to invest more in these communication lines. And then one last thing that I really wanted to mention is in Europe, we need to eventually understand that we need to prepare, not only because Donald Trump will serve a second term in the Oval Office, even beyond Donald Trump. What I'm talking about is NATO, defense security, and it's with regard to trade and tariffs. So it's good to build up something like a core Europe of the form of the Weimar Triangle. You have Germany, France, and Poland. Add to that the UK and Italy, so the influential economies on the so-called old continent in Europe, and form a strong group and put in place a toolkit, a toolbox of also, that you have something as a response if you sit down at a negotiation table with Donald Trump himself or with his team, with his administration, that the Europeans can say, well, we are strong. We are big economies. We are your partner, but don't fool us. We are also sent out as a signal of strength. I hope, and I see signs happening over the last several weeks and months in Europe, that this is being established. Our own party chairman, Friedrich Merz, who's likely to be the next German chancellor, is heavily investing a lot of time in this, to building up this core Europe. We have some, that Donald Trump, who understands only the language of strength, that he shows some respect and it's, do business with him amongst partners, but on equal footing.
It's interesting to see that the EU is supposed, to have a voice by itself with Ursula von der Leyen and be able to deal with the Trump administration too. But you think it's better if a small group of countries go about it?
Yeah. Otherwise, look, we are 27 member countries, which is not. It's an idea from the early 1990s. This core Europe that some, who want to go ahead, who align the policies and go ahead, and over time, those who want to follow, we prepare the path, make political decisions. Otherwise, it's so difficult with smaller countries with only, 2 million or so population, and then you have Germany with 82 million, and completely differently structured economies in Europe. We are one club. We share all the values together. But I think it's worthwhile thinking about and acting actually to build this core group and step ahead, because otherwise I think we will lose time and we will lose the competitive advantage.
So that's on the state level. Jay, I'd be curious, you deal a lot with corporations and you help them navigate geopolitics in the world. What do you tell your customers today, or the corporations you talk to, in addressing, especially the foreign ones, the one from outside the United States?
Well, maybe I can reframe that question and say what I'm hearing. I'm hearing excitement on one hand and real concern on another hand. On the excitement side of the ledger, there is a real sense of possibility with the policies that President Trump will put in place regarding juicing the economy. What do I mean by juicing the economy? Well, we've already seen a 6% uptick in the market since the election, and he is projecting that he wants to maintain this bull run that we've had in the US market since October 2022. And that will be done through, as was mentioned, deregulation, but specifically financial sector deregulation. That will be done through an extension of the tax reforms that were put in place in 2017, which are due to be either extended or will sunset at the end of next year. That will be through support of critical industries, including those around AI. That will be around support through crypto. Now, he has a lot of supporters in the crypto industry, and he's come out and said, this is going to be an area of focus for us in the economy. So what he wants to do is create some running room, roughly 12 months at least running room, whereby he can make some of these tariff adjustments that will allow him to negotiate on the tariff side and still have the economy pushing ahead. Of course, the corporate leaders I'm talking to are most concerned about the tariffs because of the inflationary pressure, the pressure on cost for them in terms of inputs, but also for the consumer, the end consumer. They're also very concerned about the immigration policy decisions that President Trump has said he wants to do in terms of deporting those that are illegally present in the United States. If you look at major areas of growth in the past in the United States economy, construction, agriculture, healthcare, and politically important sectors like elder care, child care, travel and tourism, these are all heavily exposed to labor constraints. And so there's going to be also pressure from corporate leaders to make some compromises on the immigration topic and potentially to look at immigration in a much broader sense. Now, that's a third rail in US politics when there is a divided government. But with government consolidated in the hands of one political party, I think there's actually an opportunity to think about immigration much more broadly than just deporting those that are illegally present. Finally, I'll say this DOGE effort, it's not a stunt.
DOGE is to cut regulation, right?
The so-called Department of Government Efficiency, which is being led by Vivek and Elon. It's not a stunt. There's actually a real sense that the Republican Party has a responsibility, even a requirement, to make government more efficient. This has been a mantra for the Republican Party for a long time. And of course, government spending increased tremendously under the first Trump administration. So Republicans are not immune from fiscal problems of their own making. But the idea of creating more government efficiency and accountability is very politically popular, not only within the party, but more broadly for the United States polity as a whole. Now, how that will be done, whether it's going to be done in a politically expedient way, one can expect that. But there is a fiscal element to this as well. Elon Musk has come out and said he's going to eliminate $2 trillion of government spending. Now, that's impossible. We all know in this room, we I think can agree that's impossible because there isn't that amount of non-discretionary government, discretionary government spending that can be cut. But there are areas within the budget that can be addressed, that can be can be pared down, which will, again, have a positive effect on growth, positive effect on the overall inflation, and will alleviate some of the tension that is going to build up with the Fed. I mean, it's a really good signal that Jerome Powell was asked to stay on, because that will allow for policy continuity and will allow for continued independence of the Fed. But we are potentially on a collision course after roughly 12 months if we see the economy continue to grow, if we see the tariffs being enacted at a certain rate, for inflation to be persistent and for that to maintain itself as a political issue going into the midterm elections. And so I think that is an area of concern as well.
You wanted to add something, right?
Just a short.
Yes.
So I think that I've attended many conferences like this.
Yes.
And the typical discussion about Trump have been to share the concern or in grievances, and then discuss about how to mitigate or minimize the risk. So I think that is an important discussion, but the more effective discussion could be, again, is to think about how to take advantage of his DNA. His DNA is unpredictability and disruptivity. And the world is, in the world of disruptive, in a disruptive world, sometimes disruptive leadership can shake the adversaries or can shake the system and create, I'm not supporting it, but Trump is elected, so we should try to take advantage of that. For example, on the issue of North Korea or China or whatever. But specifically, maybe if we just start discussing about it, we run out of time. So.
But I agree with you. There's a feeling that things are going to be shaken.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just watching to see where the fruits are going to fall and what are the opportunities to size. I mean, really, they're ready. And you said there were excitement, and I agree with that, because some people are saying, okay, the rules are going to change, and we might get a... Yasseen?
Oh, there's one issue that actually concerns me quite a bit. I think the most consequential decision that Trump will take will be to withdraw from anything that has to do with climate. And this is an issue that is of concern to this country.
Because that's a multilateral issue, and it's not his strong point.
But the United States does have an effect, and doing things without them, without access to their technology, is going to be difficult, especially the federal government. The saving grace is that the United States is a huge country with a huge private sector, and what I would tell people is that if you look at what happened in 2016, Trump did withdraw from the Paris Agreement. But in spite of that, overall, US emissions went down. And so if countries like ours can take advantage of what's available in the United States in terms of the private sector, in terms of actually states that are really interested in this issue, without having to resort to the federal government, I think we'd manage to salvage something out of this.
Is there any questions in the room? Because I see that we have 15 minutes left. So if anybody wants to wave, in case. Otherwise, we have plenty of material to go. But yeah, we have one here over there. Does anyone has a mic, please? Microphone? Anybody? Here's a microphone for the gentleman.
Hi, sorry, Nicolas Pieux again. Rather addressed to you, Jay. You said excitement, and you talked about deregulation to prolong the bull run. And you talked about financial deregulation. So I'm an investor, and I have to be very clear. What I'm hearing is a very nicely prepared way to the next major bubble burst in the years to come. Gov-like loans are higher than they've ever been before. They represent 90% of leveraged finance today. The non-banking sector has more importance than it has ever taken. The dry powder of private equity is $11 trillion today. So I do hear that, but as a European, or as I think anyone else, I would say, okay, and then when things fall out, there will be a mess. US will pick up because this is the strength of the US, and it will be, again, a land of rooms all over the world, again, and the people who will pay the price are not the people who will cause the issue.
Well, that's a legitimate concern, I could say. We might.
I could take it. We have a banker on our panel, so maybe I can defer first to you.
You know, the Bitcoin explosion, and we're going to rush into.
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer your question. I'd like to say a couple of things. I see the clock is turning, and we want to give an opportunity to people to ask questions. First of all, don't expect all the nominees to be confirmed. And don't expect Trump to push hard to get some of them confirmed. I'm prepared to discuss some of the individual situations. Some of the names that have been put forward for certain positions are controversial. Let's look at the positive side of this equation. People on the economic side are likely to be confirmed. We have, I don't know him personally, but the incoming Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, is someone that several of my close friends know well. He's an experienced person, he's a decent person. As you know, the post of Secretary of the Treasury took Trump a while to decide who appoint. This is a very reassuring nomination, in my opinion, and he will be confirmed. The other one is the incoming chairman of the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, Paul Atkins. I've known Paul Atkins for 25 years. He was a commissioner of the SEC. He was in charge of the transition team between the Obama administration and the Trump administration in 2016. He's somebody who's effectively much more prepared to adopt and support some of the initiatives that you make reference to, like cryptos and so on. We had an opportunity to discuss about this specific topic yesterday in the workshop chaired by Chairman Trichet. So those are things that are, in my opinion, reassuring.
So what you're saying is that those people are good people, they can manage, because
someone
he's talking
that
about
I know,
the next financial crisis
okay,
that you might be walking in.
Yeah, somebody whom I know very well also, he used to be my congressman for a number of years, is now nominated for the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, Lee Zeldin. He ran for governor of New York against Governor Hochul at the last election 2 years ago, and he came very close to win this nomination. As I said, you know, since 2006, all governors in New York have been Democrats. This is, I would say, a moderate Republican. So we have, now, two words I would like to say, if I may, about immigration and tariff. And I may disagree to some extent with what has been said, to some extent only, by other participants in the panel. I don't believe that Trump expects to enforce tariffs. He had some tariffs during his first administration. Biden administration came and didn't change anything. It was as protectionist, so to speak, as the Trump administration. I make a difference between the tariffs that he talked applying from the first day on European, on Canada, on Mexico, and so on. I think that's largely a negotiating tactic to bring people. You remember what happened? The next day, Trudeau was coming to see Trump in Florida, and Christine Lagarde said, instead of fighting, let's talk.
Well, yeah, that stirred a big debate in
So
Europe.
but China is different. I'm not saying at some point he's not trying to get a great bargain with China, but China, this is for the administration something that when Biden administration came to power, if you remember, there was a meeting in Alaska between the Chinese and the Americans. It was a disaster because the Americans start talking about human rights and a number of issues, Hong Kong, the Uyghurs, and so on. That's not going to happen with the Trump administration, but they're going to talk about very serious matters. So that's something I would, if you're concerned about the inflationary impact of rates, tariffs, and so on, I think there's a big difference that's going to be in terms of strategy. Remember, Trump never reads, but he wrote one book, not by himself, called The Art of the Deal. It's all about dealing, dealing, dealing. And he may want to make a big bargain at some point with China, but with the other country, it's purely a tactic to get them to work on, for example, The fentanyl, we have a number of people, young people who are killed in America by this drug, which is imported from other countries. He wants to block fentanyl. This is a national security issue. He will use every possible means to deal with that. Now, immigration, and I'll stop. Immigration, we've seen open doors for the last 4 years. One of the reasons why Kamala Harris lost the election is the fact that they didn't deal properly with the immigration problem. There are many dimensions in the immigration problem. I don't believe for 1 second that it's going to deport 11 million people. This is just not happen. It's infeasible. It would cost a fortune. Practically, they don't have the logistics to do it. They're talking of using, I mean, this is nonsense. It's not going to happen. But keep some numbers in mind. There are 40,000 people in America who've committed serious crime, who are illegal immigrants. These people are still in jail in America. They're going to be sent back to where they're coming from. There are 600,000 people who've committed some sort of offense other than breaking the immigration law. These people are also potentially in the process of being sent back home. Obama administration expelled a lot of people. Several 100,000 people were expelled by the Obama administration. Now, at the same time, Trump has said that he will regularize the problem of the dreamers. The dreamers are the people who were brought in by their illegal parents in America, but they lived in America all their life. They never lived anywhere else. He said clearly during the campaign that he will deal with the problem of the dreamers. He also said that he's prepared to give green card to graduate from good
Foreigners from good universities.
So this is somebody who's prepared, on one hand, to take some measures with the criminals, and at the same time also wants to stabilize. And I think there is a possibility. Marco Rubio, many years ago, when he was a young senator, was part of a commission of 8 people, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, who put together a plan for reforming the immigration system. So I think the immigration system, beyond the effect of, if you will, the meetings and so on, this is something that they want to deal with. And there is a chance. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to happen, but I would not be too concerned that we'll see millions of people being deported.
Just one point on this, if I may.
Do you have
very
an
quickly,
answer on his question?
Very quickly,
eventually?
please remember that one of the first measures taken by the Trump administration in 2017 was the travel ban. And precisely Iraq was included on it. We managed to get off only because we agreed to take in people who were being deported because they'd committed crimes. So that's a serious issue, and I think it'll take what you said will happen.
There's a question over there.
Okay, there's a question in the back here. Thank you. And
Thank you very much for this conversation. Guillaume Calonico from CDPQ. It seems to me that Trump has a trilemma, an impossible trinity, because he wants tariff, he wants a weaker dollar, and he wants tax cut. So it seems to me that it's impossible to have the three together. What can he do, really, with these 3 things he wants to do in America in its second mandate?
so tariff taxing, I missed one word.
Tariff, tax cut, and a weaker dollars.
Weaker currency.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's complicated indeed, yes. Does anybody want to take, well, maybe Peter, because you're a big exporter, so.
Can I'll just make a,
And Jay,
Peter,
and
do you
Jay
wanna-
go ahead, Jay. and
Didn't mean
Peter
to interrupt
afterwards.
Peter, please.
Okay,
no.
yeah, I just start. Thanks for that question. Of course, this is of deep concern.
Currency, dollar.
So, as I said earlier, I think, you know, I said, take him by his very own words. I expect this is all something that we need to take into consideration. That this will all happen, and for us, especially with regard to tariffs, as a big exporting nation, I think I saw the numbers of, just for my country, like annually $15 billion or euros that would hit our exporting businesses. So it's quite something. Might be even more. So there might be some truth in it that everything that you hear now that's put in the window it's just negotiation techniques. I hope so. Maybe to some extent, but certainly not completely. So I really think we should take it very, very seriously. It's not so, well, he will not really impose all these things and not, follow his own concepts. I think this will happen. And that's why I said earlier, if you want to, you were talking about, mitigating the risk, and I was talking about putting measures in place now while you still can, to have something in place, something, as a possible response if you come into the situation that you sit down at this negotiation table across the Atlantic now from my place in the world, and that you have something that you can put in the window as well. You may call it as a negotiation technique. So, and then take into consideration as well what you said, deregulation and also, weakening the dollar. I mean, he wants to make the United States not only great or greater or whatever again. I still think, by the way, the United States of America is a great nation. I love it, and they are super strong with regard to economy, with regard to culture, with regard to military. So this is a stupid motto anyway. But anyway, I didn't choose for this. He did. So, I think to some extent we have to also see that with regard to competition, in both sides of the Atlantic, in the United States of America, in Europe, the world has developed, has changed since Trump won, since Obama over the past, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, something has happened. And every nation, every leader of any given nation, be it Germany, France, this country, or be it Washington, or the United States of America, needs to, if he or she wants to be a good and true leader serving in the interests of its own folks, needs to, try to make his own or her own country competitive. Geopolitics play a role. It's because of wars. It's because in the example of Germany, for example, we messed it up. We, increased naively our energy dependency, Nord Stream 2 and all these things. Donald Trump one was right. And many were sharing this view, except for Angela Merkel, for example, by that time. I think it was wrong. And I told her when I was her Transatlantic coordinator not to do anything about it. So, taking this all together, put this all together in a box, make wise decisions, but be prepared and not step forward alone. Try to build new alliances, and then this is how this world works.
Thank you. Jay, you want to answer back?
Sure,
and then
I'll
we'll
answer
take
the,
one more
the question and also maybe make a point to Nicolas in response to his question.
Yeah.
Just with a little inside baseball, as we say in America, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, they're both coming out of the asset management sector. They are in segments of asset management that are high risk-taking, and they've made their fortunes with high-risk, high-reward bets. And so, Nicolas, they are under the assumption that allowing for that segment of the capital markets to continue to function is in the best interest, not only of firms like theirs, but of the entire economy. And they were facing almost the exact opposite scenario had Harris won. And so they are going to ensure that that gets locked in and that private capital as well continues to be able to function relatively freely. Now, the inside baseball is that Lutnick, as the head of commerce, if he's confirmed, will have oversight of tariff policy, which traditionally has been the purview of the trade representative. But the trade representative actually is going to be folded in, at least according to what's been announced publicly, under commerce. And right now, it looks like the play on tariffs is going to be much more around commerce-related topics than tariffs simply for trade protection reasons. And why? Well, it's going to be centered around industrial espionage, preventing the theft of intellectual property, ensuring that from a national security perspective, CFIUS gets strengthened. That's the Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States. And that critical technologies such as chips, as was discussed by many panels, continues to be controlled, at least as is possible. So I think about tariffs, yes, from a negotiating tactic, but specifically to advance specific Commerce Department objectives that Lutnick will have on his agenda, which the president, by the way, will care about, but when it gets technical, he'll allow Commerce to take the lead on.
Okay. I think we have just time for one last question. Thank you.
Last week at Notre Dame in Paris, the most looked at American wasn't Donald Trump, it was Elon Musk. What would you think will be Elon Musk doing in the months or years to come? Will it be the real éminence grise, as we say in French, or mere Rigoletto? And you know how it ended for Rigoletto.
Thank you so much for this last question. It's perfect. Jean-Claude, do you want to answer?
Elon Musk was probably the largest financial contributor to the presidential campaign of Donald Trump. He spent like $100 million to a PAC, Political Action Committee, and he was particularly instrumental. Somebody whom I know very well works for him and works particularly in Pennsylvania. As you know, Pennsylvania was a very critical state in this election. So Elon Musk is a Democrat. Until a year ago, he was a Democrat. By the way, look at, some people are making jokes, some of my friends in the US are making jokes. I said, why are you complaining about Trump being elected? He's surrounded by a Kennedy, he's surrounded by Elon Musk, he's surrounded by Tulsi Gabbard, and so on and so forth. He's surrounded by Democrats. So, I mean, more seriously, Elon Musk will be there for a period of time. He has to manage huge conflict of interest between his own personal interests and what is being expected to do is with the dodgy that you were making reference to. So over time, I would not bet too very long, but he will be there for a period of time with Vivek Ramaswamy. Are they going to be able to achieve something? There is a need to do something about government efficiency. Everybody agrees on that. It goes well beyond the Republican Party, by the way. Independent and Democrats feel the same way. So he's there for a period of time. He's made a major contribution. How long is he going to be there for? You know, ultimately, he will take care of his own interest.
Okay, so I guess we still have a lot of question marks, but thank you very much all for your attention, and we're going to break it here because our time is up. Thank you, and thank you all for being here today.